Okay, so for some reason my microphone keeps going on mute, so please excuse me. This work stream arose because of a lot of conversations we were having in the cross-border community and how you actually address a payment that you're sending from one country to another. Simple MISDN is not enough. We know already that many countries have multiple accounts associated with a MISDN, and so we need a general form which can be used across multiple counterparties. So we then had a lot of conversations with Arrangé at UNCDF, and he separately started working on something that he calls PASS. So we've kind of shaped this work stream then to align with what UNCDF and Arrangé are doing in that regard, and we'll see how that progresses. So the problem statement is this, essentially. How does a customer of a bank, an FSP in country one, reliably address payments to a customer of a different DFSP in a different country? There are often problems with addressing these cross-border payments. So a sender might not be able to procure the recipient's precise payment information, or its transmission by voice is error-prone, or there's various elements of duplication, or whatever it may be. In other cases, the sending PSPs, including the banks, are not able to uniquely identify and validate the recipient and its bank as the senders, and the recipient's PSPs do not belong to the same payment system. Further, the most optimal and cost-effective path to reach the recipient through one or more payment systems isn't always clear for the sending PSP. Inadvertently, this adds to the complexity, burden, and cost of international remittances, making them inaccessible for remitters, particularly vulnerable migrants. And this leaves a lot to be desired in terms of user experience. Slide. Okay. So the UNCDF has proposed the introduction of what they call the Proxy Addressing System Service, PASS. It's defined as a directory of proxy directories, so it's a directory of directories that connects multiple local, regional, and global proxy directories that store proxies. This will help link participating payment systems globally in a standardized way, with the aim of reducing the friction when making payments from one country to another. Besides account addressing, PASS will also enable sender PSPs to provision an optimal path by returning one or more payment systems the recipient's PSP is part of for service fulfillment. And this information can be used by sending PSPs to identify the most efficient path for routing these transactions towards the recipient PSP, based on existing commercial agreements, including price. The sender PSP will be responsible for initiating payment transactions through the payment system of their choice. PASS is solely an addressing system and is not involved in the payment transaction itself. So this is how PASS views the world of international payments. If I can just go through the steps here. Sender wants to make a payment. So the sender provides the sending PSP with the details of the recipient to initiate a transaction. For example, the destination country and the proxy. In addition, the recipient's full name could also be provided for payee validation, which we all know is an important step. Step 2, sending PSP uses the information provided by the sender to make a proxy lookup through PASS. Step 3, PASS validates the information received in the addressing request through its network of connected directories, prior to prioritizing lookup based on the destination country. So essentially, PASS goes through every directory that it can think of which may be relevant for this particular recipient and tries to get a proxy response. In step 4, if there is no match, PASS will return a no matches found message to the sending PSP, which in turn informs the sender. Step 5, if there is a match, PASS returns the outcome of the validation process along with the recipient PSP's legal entity identifier and a range of other details. For example, PASS could return that the receiving PSP exists, its LEI, the recipient's proxy is validated, and the list of payments supported by the recipient PSP. Step 6, the sending PSP uses the information received from PASS, including the payment system supported, to send payment instructions to the payment system of their choice. And step 7, the payment from the sending PSP to the recipient PSP is completed, and the sending PSP informs the sender with a successful payment receipt message. So steps 6 and 7 are not strictly part of PASS, that we would regard as within the Moduloop domain. So PASS is hanging off the side before the transaction actually starts. So what's the implications for us here today? First, the UNCDF are proposing a proof of concept. We very much want to be involved. It fits squarely into the objectives of Pillar 3 to ensure Moduloop is ready for multilateral cross-border transactions. So we want to be involved in not just participating in the proof of concept, but helping RNJ and the UNCDF to define it. It's a direct follow-on from our international payments addressing workstream from the last PI. But we need to do some work to evaluate how the PASS approach can be integrated with ALS and build towards that proof of concept. We also need to consider any compliance issues arising out of this approach, separately from any technical issues, but we can work with RNJ on that. I'll now call on Sam to talk through his first thoughts on how PASS might be integrated with Moduloop.
Thanks, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can we quickly go to slide number 4, please, if you don't mind? We Moduloop people, I think we think that we can solve every problem, or at least every payment problem with Moduloop. So when I see that, the first thing comes to my mind is ALS can do that with some caveats configuration. So if you see there, the step 1, we can probably look at it as the information from sender, and then we can see how the get parties or get participants call correlate. Can you hear me? Yeah, correlate to this. So we have see that PASS, the proxy PASS system as something that's connected to several registries, several proxy directories, either one or more of them correlating to a particular country registry. So the way that ALS now works is we have oracles for different registries, and we can easily see how it can be used for a PASS system, of course. But I'm also thinking maybe a couple of tweaks to this where we start looking at the resolution part of it, and looking at the mapping and the payee details. And then here in step 6 and 7, it directly proceed to the transaction, but looking at our Moduloop model, applying our Moduloop model, maybe we can use those routes to actually get the payee details first, and then also recommend using like an asynchronous approach or 3-step process of lookup, coding, and transfers, at least from our side to that. So we try to quickly put that thinking into a sequence diagram in slide number 7, where, most, if not all of you already know this flow where we have our ALS and we have Moduloop ALS playing the role of the PASS here. And then there's a payer FSP, payee FSP, then country registries. For example, there is a country given here, ABC for the sake of discussion. We'll direct our initial call for get participants to that particular registry. And we need more information than normal, where not just the mapping, but as RNJ describes in the paper, we need more details like the confirmation that the proxy, which is the identifier, the DFSP ID, in our language, the PSP. These are both valid. And then also payment systems that particular entity supports, like Mojaloop, Visa, things like that, I suppose, so that the payer FSP, once all this information is sent to the payer FSP, they can make an informed decision and choose the optimal route for the payment itself. So that's our initial thinking. One other point I'd like to add is, when looking at key requirements for pass from the paper, we look at multiple proxy support, uniqueness, resolution of duplicates, things like that. ALS fits the bill very, very closely. I mean, there are some things like trust, maintaining audit trails, which come under implementation details and scheme considerations. But the design and technical side of things, I think ALS fits very nicely. So we'd like to explore that in the coming PI working with Arun J. Paul to see how we can see this working through either a version of ALS or ALS as is right now. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I think that's actually the end of the presentation that we had on this. Are there any questions that we can address now? Karina, I think I saw a question from you. Yes. About who would operate it, yes. And maybe that's, to be frank, a proof of concept like this is not really a technical proof of concept. We know how to do this from a technical perspective, as Sam has already demonstrated. I mean, there are issues to be explored. This is mostly an operational proof of concept to address those questions and essentially to make sure that we can organizationally and operationally support this kind of approach. I hope that answers your question. And yes, I see. No, yes, you make a very good point about the use of an LEI. It does seem the by far the best approach. Any other questions?
Quickly, for me, Paul, sorry if you can hear me. The quick question is relating to the proxy addressing scheme that was being used in Europe. I thought it was under a proof of concept, and maybe even further along than that. The World Bank proposal, of course, from 2021 was, how to build something like this. But I thought that there was one already in the trial stage within SEPA.
If we can learn from that, we welcome it.
Yeah, although I think the proposal from UNCDF is already further along, so I think that's quite good. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Simeon.
Thank you, Paul. Fahad, you have your hands raised. I think your question was for the previous session. Do you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, Fahad? Fahad, you go ahead. I can see you're unmuted, but I don't think we can hear you just yet. Yeah, Fahad, we can't hear you. Is it just me or? Okay. Fahad, what we're going to do is I'd request you to type out your question in the chat, and then I'll ask Michael to answer it there, if that's okay with you, because we're not able to hear you. What we'll do is I want to pass it over to the cross-border messaging team, Michael Richards and Justice on ISO 200.022. Michael, are you ready?
Yes. Never readier.